We are live.
All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'd like to call this meeting to order on Monday, March 10th, 2025, and begin by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish, whose people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding the Leilahwem, Bowen Island. And so welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality meeting of Monday, March 10th, 2025, and thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to introduce, as I always do, the other elected members of our council here today. Starting on our right, we have Councillor Alex Jurgensen. To his left is Councillor Sue Ellen Fast and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. To her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Judy Getty. My far left is Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Wake, and to his right is Councillor Allison Morse. Also joining us here this afternoon, we have members of our professional staff team, including our corporate officer, Sophie Insignia. Our CAO, Kieran Dillon, is away today, but we do have our CFO, Kristen Watson, as well as other members of our staff who may be presenting reports here this afternoon. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the public comment and question and answer portion of the meeting, your voice and presence will be included in the permanent recording, which will be available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, and it is streaming live on our YouTube channel where it will be kept for posterity. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our community. We are all passionate about what happens here. We encourage everyone to make a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and direct any comments during the public comment or question and answer portion of the meeting to myself. Those following along either in person or online today or later on watching the recording, you can find the agenda and full council package for this afternoon's meeting at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, including all of the staff reports that are being presented here today. And with that, I will look for, as I just manage my screens here, to the corporate officer for the introduction of any late items here this afternoon.
There's one on table item, and that's attachment 5 to item 7.1, circulated by.
Okay. And with that, can I have a motion that the agenda and late items be approved for March 10th? Moved by Councillor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Jurgensen. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries unanimously. Moving on to comments, I'll look to the corporate officer for the number of public comments we have today.
And just one today.
Okay. So the commenter will have a full, the full 3 minutes to come up and chat with council. Your time doesn't start until you're sitting down and comfortable. So yeah, come on up, Ms. Montgomery. Yes, Councilor.
Go ahead. I just asked Ms. Montgomery if she'd seen the attachments that were on our I guess the agenda that we received by email, and those have not been included in the regular change season.
Okay, we can address that or have them sent out. We are in public comments right now, so I will
Okay.
turn it over to you whenever you're ready, Ms. Montgomery.
Thank you for letting me sit here and talk to all of you, and also for just your consideration of our application for subdivision of our home at 1360 Mount Gardner Road. My sons and myself have watched all of the committee meetings, and then one of the committees, Sue Ellen's Parks and Trails, actually came and walked the property, and that was really great. Thanks so much for doing that, you guys. And what Noah and I and Hamish and Gabriel actually want you guys to know is that we are more than willing to work with whatever needs to be done to be fair to our community and happen and make it very clear that this is so that I can stay in our house and the home that we built. So this is definitely elder wanting to age in place, that's me. And really and truly, I guess all I wanted to say to you guys was thank you for considering our application. And to know that we are willing to do whatever it takes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's do it when it comes up on the agenda. Okay, next item is approval of the consent agenda. I'll look to councilors for items they would like to remove from the consent agenda. Sorry.
12.8, 12.11, 12.16.
Councilor Fishing, remove things from the consent agenda. Councilor Morse.
4.7.
And other folks looking to remove things from the consent agenda? Not seeing any. Can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda? Moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Jurgensen. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. So we'll deal with these in numerical order. 4.7. 2024 Information and Privacy Program Report. Over to you for this position.
Just a curiosity question. You may not be able to answer this off the top of your head, but it's a very brief report and there were 7 files. So 2 required fee payment. So they were more than 3 hours.
Right.
But I guess, so were all the other 5, did they take 3 hours or 1 hour or?
They took less than 3 hours and they were prior to me.
Okay, so, so I guess what I'm saying is we spent 15 hours, 3 times 5 on 5 of the things. And how much time did we spend on the 2 that required fee?
I believe that's in the report,
Well, it said how much they paid, but
it is about $7.50 for 15 minutes. Do a quick arithmetic on that.
I've got to do a little arithmetic here. Okay, never mind, I'll do the
3 or
real.
4 hours, yeah.
$30
Yeah. So 10 hours and 6 hours, so about a week's worth of staff time spending dealing with that one. Okay, thank you.
Councilor
We
Getty.
received the report.
Moved by Councilor Morse, so we'll get receipt moved and seconded. So moved by Councilor Morse, seconded by Councilor Fast, and over to you, Councilor Getty.
Thank you. Is this an increase? No? Over previous years?
This. I'm so sorry, I just don't know what happened in the years before, but I hope an officer would be able to.
At funding, the step has started taking on FOI requests last year, so before that it was myself. And anecdotally, I can say it's no, because that's a consistent call.
Okay, so receipt has been moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carried unanimously. Next up, 12.8, Jane Osborne regarding letter not in support of the multi-use path dated February 27th. Over to you, Councilor Sutton.
So I'd like to address all 3 of these at once, actually, the 12.8, 12.11, 12.16.
Just let me read out the titles so that everyone knows where we are. So 12.8 was Jane Osborne regarding letter not in support of the multi-use path. 12.11 was Trevor Hodge regarding the 2025 draft budget. And 12.16 was Steve Hoffar regarding 2025 BIM draft budget. Over to you, Councilor Sutton.
Thank you to the chair. I just wanted to just comment on these briefly. They all are related and they all speak in different avenues about the same thing and the tighten belts and avoid spending on anything non-essential. We're all going to have different interpretations of what essential and non-essential is. However, I wanted to speak to these items only to highlight that there's a lot of people out there on this island who are increasingly aware of the budget issues we have. As a council, we indicated strategic priority some time ago. The goal was one of our goals was to finish what was started, and then build from there. we're getting closer and closer to actually finishing some of the things that were started either by us or by prior councils. But these letters, they just simply help to highlight the need to be extremely rigorous, for council to be extremely rigorous, and in some cases, be willing to make some decisions that are going to limit some of the amenities that all of us would ideally like to see on the island. So I just wanted to highlight that there are people out there thinking along those lines, and we need to acknowledge that. Beyond that, I'd just like to move to receive the letters for information.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? For folks following along, we will be discussing the budget in 8.2 as well, where I'm presuming we'll get into some of the nitty gritty and nuts and bolts of what's coming. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and that carries. With the consent agenda being dealt with, we are now on to section 7, bylaws 7.1, 561 and 564 Collins Road rezoning, bylaws 671 and 672. We have Mr. Daniel Martin, our manager of planning and development, joining us here today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm here to present a rezoning application. All right, by way of recap, this is a rezoning application on Collins Road, so past the United Church, past the Collins Farm strata on Collins Road, just north of Griffin Regional Park. And the proposal before you is a proposal to rezone the property that currently straddles Collins Road, so the property can be subdivided into north and south of the property. North and south of Collins Road. Council saw this in November and gave first reading to bylaw 671 and 672. Bylaw 671 would amend the community plan that changed the designation to permit the subdivision into 2 lots. And bylaw 672 would place the entire property within the settlement residential 1A zone, which as well would give a minimum lot size so that the property owner could subdivide into 2 parcels. Just where we are in the process, council's seen this a couple times already. We introduced it to council, and then when the bylaw was presented for first reading, we're now here for consideration of second reading. And then in order to adopt this bylaw, there'd be a public hearing presented for third reading, and then after consent of the Islands Trust, it would be considered for adoption. In terms of referrals after first reading, council referred this to the Islands Trust Executive Committee, who found that the 2 bylaws are not contrary or at variance with the Islands Trust policy statement, with a caveat that said, provided the conservation covenants and trail access proposed as amenity contributions are realized. They added some qualifiers to their statements. We referred it to the Islands Trust Conservancy, in part because the property immediately adjacent to the southern portion of the lot has a conservation covenant held by the Islands Trust Conservancy. And they replied, first of all, that their interests are unaffected by the proposed bylaws, the 2 of them. They supported our conservation development policy, which seeks 50% be protected, and they wanted to prioritize that we consider ecological conditions, biodiversity when we are determining where to protect. They encouraged park dedication. They wanted us to consider potential negative impacts of new trails through undeveloped areas. And then their final point, I don't have on the board here, but was essentially that if the municipality and the applicants wanted to pursue the conservancy managing the conservation covenant, that they should fill out essentially their standard application to the Conservancy Board. And we referred this to the APC, our Advisory Planning Commission, who supported the bylaws, and they had 2 comments to provide for council or conditions. So they supported it conditional that the rezoning be conditional on a covenant protects at least 50% of the land, including any environmentally sensitive areas, and that the proposed trail connection extends from Collins Road to the closest practical point within Griffin Park. So wanting to minimize impact on environmentally sensitive areas and minimize the impact on use of property by the applicant. So what's before you is the bylaw to be considered for second reading, and just a note in here that then we would place these conditions through a protective covenant following third reading before the bylaw is adopted. That a protective covenant prohibiting development on at least 50% of the land across the 2 future parcels. And what staff proposes, this would be, at this point, would be a covenant saying that at time of subdivision, that 50% of the land be protected and that priority be given to protection of these environmentally sensitive areas. So that the applicant doesn't have to designate at this point where, where all the development would happen, but that would need to be spelled out in a subdivision, and that's when the covenant would be placed. And then that as well, at time of subdivision, a trail easement would be given to connect Collins Road to Crippen Park. And the staff recommendation is that the bylaws be read a second time and referred to a public hearing.
Thank you. Questions for the planner? Councillor Getty, followed by Councillor Morris.
The 50%, I haven't walked the property, but does that unreasonably limit the area that can be developed?
I mean, it's handy, so I'm going just to a map here showing it. It's handy in that essentially on the northern property is where there's a wetland and a rocky bluff area. And so essentially you'd be cutting a line somewhere, north-south in that property, and same on the southern lot. There's a point, I don't have the contour map here, but there's a point where the property starts to drop off towards Crippen Park, and that as well would make sense to me, is that's what we would be protecting, is where it backs onto Crippen Park, where it backs onto the property to the north.
And there's still enough left for.
Yeah.
Councillor Morris.
Can you put the map back up? I don't know if you've got a bigger map. I'm just curious as to where the property is that the Allen's Trust already has a covenant on.
It's 551 Collins, so it's to the east of the southern.
Oh, okay, because their letter made some reference to the southern boundary, and the southern boundary is Crippen Park.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's that lot.
It's this, if you see my cursor, it's
Yeah.
this lot. Yeah,
Okay, so there is already a building on that lot.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is that an APTEP covenant, do you know?
It's a covenant held by the Allen's Trust Conservancy. It's not an APTEP. It's just a conservation covenant.
They were interested in holding the other covenant if we put one on, but it's not a,
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Fast.
I don't have a question. I can just say that the property next door, as a former member of the Islands Trust Conservancy Board and longtime neighbor and Bowen Island Conservancy person, anyway, that the little patch that you can see on the lot next door is a building envelope, and the rest of it is all under conservation covenant. So it just has a small place where the building can be, and the rest of it was covenanted by one of the Collins sisters.
Okay, see no further questions. Maybe we'll get the recommendation on the floor. Councillor Fast.
Yeah, be happy to move. That bylaw number 671, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Official Community Plan, bylaw number 282, 2010, amendment bylaw number 671, 2024, be read a second time. That bylaw number 672, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use bylaw number 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 672, 2024, be read a second time. And that bylaws number 671, 672 be referred to a public hearing, period.
Is that a second, Councillor Jurgensen?
Yes.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Jurgensen. Any further discussion or debate? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. This is the first thing we've referred to a public hearing. Exciting. 7.2, thank you, Mr. Martin. 1360 Mount Gardner Road rezoning. We have Mr. Drew Batkin, our Island Community Planner, here with us today.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this report is to return to Council to share the results of the committee referrals for the rezoning and OCP amendment application for 1360 Mount Gardner Road. So this application was first introduced to Council at the October 15th, 2024 meeting, where the proposal was discussed to amend zoning of 1360 Mount Gardner Road from RR3 to an SR1C zoning, and to amend the OCP designation to a designation that would permit subdivision by splitting the lot into two. At that meeting, council voted to refer the application to the Advisory Planning Commission, the Housing Advisory Committee, and the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee for recommendations. This report is to return with the results of those referrals. So the first committee to discuss the referral was the Housing Advisory Committee, who met on the 1st of November 2024. They supported the application and provided the following comments. One, that when the affordable housing policy is applied to this rezoning application, they would recommend cash in lieu contribution to the Housing Reserve Fund instead of delivery of affordable housing units. And number two, that properties to the south have the same zoning designation being requested. So it seems like a reasonable request. The second committee to discuss the referral was the Advisory Planning Commission on November 14th, 2024. They supported the application and provided the following comment. One, that the agency is supportive of the application since it provides smaller lot sizes to enable more housing on Bowen Island, which is appropriate and consistent with neighboring properties, and assuming that the services can support it. Two, that there be some contribution made that would be at least partially compliant with the conservation development policy. And the third committee to discuss the referral was the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee, who first discussed the application at their meeting on December 9th, 2024. There was extensive discussion around possible amenity contributions regarding what form they could take and whether they would be a fit with the existing park and trail systems in the area. Ultimately, the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee felt that they did not want to provide a recommendation without visiting the property on a site visit. So an in-person visit was arranged with Rosie Montgomery on December 20th, 2024, and that was attended by staff and several members of the committee. That committee reconvened on January 28th, 2025, and they provided the following response to council's referral: that in the absence of conservation assets to conserve, the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee are not in a position to support the application for rezoning and OCP amendments at 1360 Mount Gardner Road, since the conservation development policy requirements cannot be met. But two, the second point was that, however, should the amendments and rezoning be approved, the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee recommends restoration planting be required to promote greenway connectivity through canopy continuity and movement of native plant and animal species across the landscape and overall improvement of biodiversity in the area. Going to the historical context, it's important to discuss the context of rezonings in the area, particularly around the rezoning of multiple lots south of Bolton Road to the SR1C designation, which has been discussed with this application. It's the same zoning requested for the subject property. So that rezoning took 5 existing lots south of Bolton Road and turned them into 8 lots with a significant offering of amenities alongside the rezoning proposal. So those amenities include the following. There was donation of 7 acres of land to the Islands Trust Conservancy. There was a covenanted protection of a 10-meter tree corridor along both sides of Hikers Trail Road. There was construction of a trail connecting Mount Gardner Road and Crick Regional Park, i.e. Clarny Lake, adjacent to the unused Bolton Road allowance. There was a provision of $10,000 to BAM for the construction of a trail connecting Clarny Lake parking lot to the main trail of Mount Gardner. There was provision of $40,000 to BAM for conservation initiatives. And finally, a prohibition of creating more than 8 new lots through that subdivision. Going to precedent. So considering that the properties surrounding 1360 Mount Gardner Road are under the same zoning as the subject property, and especially considering that the size of some neighboring lots are identical to or smaller than subject property, it must be addressed that the approval of this rezoning and OCP amendment request would establish a precedent for this area, and it's likely that other property owners would submit similar requests in the future. So increasing the density of this area is not unreasonable considering the existence of other denser zones on the island, particularly just to the south of Bolton Road. However, the contribution of amenities included as a condition of the rezoning of those lots was significant and amounts to the majority of community amenities available in that area. So while the size and location of the subject property is not conducive to the provision of any community amenities, payment in lieu of amenity contributions is an option and is encouraged that the application is to be supported in order to ensure that any densification of the community occurs alongside an improvement or an increase of the amenities that the community has to offer. And in discussing this aspect of the applicant, she understands the historical precedent around amenity contributions and is willing to include some contributions as part of her proposal. In terms of public feedback, one letter has been received from an area resident that expresses concern on the introduction of another home to the area based on potential increases to foot and vehicle traffic and noise. The letter writer requests that privacy buffers, sound barriers, and thoughtful placement of the home is considered to minimize disruption to neighboring properties and protect the character of the neighborhood. It's noted that an ideal location is noted on the site plan for a future residence on the proposed lot. While the location indicated is at the minimum setback from the north property line, it's also directly abuts a bluff of trees between the two properties. During the site visit, I couldn't easily see neighboring residences thanks to the existing foliage, so I don't feel that the construction of additional residents would be expected to have a significant visual impact on the area. Since we did visit the property with the Parks, Trails and Greenways committee, I'll just share a few photos for a quick virtual site visit. So this is just on the left there, that's the new driveway that's been provided up across the what will be the proposed new lot. So it's accessing both lots essentially, bringing access to the rear lot. On the right, that is the septic field location for the proposed new lot. This next photo, these are basically both photos of the proposed location of the new homes. Photo on the left there, you can basically see what will become the dividing property line, which is right at that. I believe Rosie had pointed out that the fence or gate was about the location of where the dividing line between the two properties will be. And finally, just a photo of the left photo is has the house on the left as well as their accessory garage behind. And then the photo on the right, not much to see, just kind of showing the forested area at the rear of the property. And finally, so in conclusion, the proposed rezoning and OCP amendment for 1360 Mount Gardner Road will open up an additional single-family residential lot for sale on Bowen Island, being a small move towards increasing housing availability. However, the lack of amenity contributions associated with the application, as well as the implications of setting precedent for the densification of the Mount Gardner neighborhood, are issues that must be addressed as per the recommendations of the committees. Staff are seeking council's direction regarding the provision of community amenities. Should cash in lieu be a desired alternative for provision of amenities on the lands, staff can conduct a review of natural value of amenity contributions of past rezoning applications to determine a monetary equivalent to be required as a condition of approval. Ultimately, staff's recommendation is that council direct staff to draft amendment bylaws to amend the zoning and OCP designation at 1360 Mount Gardner Road and return to council for first reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becken. I will turn to questions. Councilor Mills.
Can you go back to the photos?
Sure, the site photos?
Yeah, so keep going. The one with the tree buffer down, so that one.
Oh,
So we're looking,
sorry.
no,
Sorry.
okay, so that new road comes up from Mount Gardner, right?
That's right, yeah.
Driveway. So the trees on the left there, they would stay as part of the construction?
That's correct, yeah.
And so that would solve the concern of the neighbor, the letter that was written?
I feel that way, yeah. It'd be very hard to see through there.
Okay, and there's houses on both sides, so there's other tree privacy that would stay on the other side of the lot, which I guess is sort of what we can see.
Yeah, I think I will say on the south side, I don't think there's quite as much tree coverage, or at least trees on this property, because the driveway does come right close to the property line, but
So
yeah.
the new driveway's on the south side of the lot or the north side of the lot?
South side a lot, but the location where this photo is, it's at the south side, so the new driveway squiggles across the property.
Oh, okay, so that's the new driveway on that, right there.
Right,
Yeah,
correct.
okay. So since it's built, obviously those trees on that side of it aren't gonna be coming down.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we can trust the existing.
All right, so that answers my question with respect to that. The other is the size of the 1360 lot versus the Bolton. I mean, there was many more lots being created. So the scale of the amenity will be significantly smaller for the 1360 lot than for the Bolton lots because of the.
Certainly, I would have to scale it down, yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Fast.
Thank you. I was one of the ones that was on the site visit, and my question relates to the trees we can see in the photo. What mechanism is there that they're protected or that they would stay? Couldn't they be cleared?
Yeah, without us, yeah, we could put as condition of subdivision, some kind of condition conserving trees, and we can set it that way, or just prescribe a building footprint, a building envelope as to where the building could go, or the other way with the intent of preserving the existing trees that are there.
And the trees on the other side, if I may, the trees on the other side, are they on this property or on the neighboring property? How would they be protected?
I think in terms of what we can see in photos, that would be mostly on this property, but yeah, any properties outside this property, sorry, any trees outside this property, yeah, we have no ability
Yeah.
to protect through this application. Right.
Thank you. Just existing trees may not stay existing. Thank you.
Councilor Saunders, followed by Councilor Morse.
Thank you through the chair. Is there any potential for either of these, well, assuming it's two lots, for either of them to be further subdivided, or is the rezoning such as, you know, if it is rezoned, does the size of those lots preclude that ever happening again?
Based on the zoning designation, we would change it to they couldn't be further broken down than these two.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councilor Morse.
I forgot my last question, which I did email you about. Can we organize a site visit?
Certainly.
Thank you. I have another question and it relates to the primary use of agriculture. Is one of the uses it has now, according to the chart in your report, as a primary use. But it would be, the proposal is to move it to where that's just agriculture becomes a secondary use or an accessory use. And so I'm wondering, seeing as how agriculture has a big role in the rural landscape as I interpret our official community plan. And you report that the Advisory Planning Commission supported the idea of smaller lot sizes being appropriate for Bowen. That seems to me to be different from the Islands Trust Preserve and Protect mandate. And I'm wondering, did the Advisory Planning Commission discuss the changes in agriculture uses being primary on that property?
Councilor Fast, I can't recall them discussing agricultural use, so I'd say no.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Morse for round 3.
Well, just, agriculture is listed as a primary use. It's not necessarily the primary use of the property right now. And agriculture would not be prevented by the new rezoning.
That's true.
So the only question I have from the chair is just a process one. So the recommendation is to direct staff to draft amendment bylaws and the OCP. And I note that we did get some fairly diverse feedback when it was sent to committee for review. So I'm curious, just if staff has any comment in the drafting of the bylaw, the drafting of the OCP amendment, are there plans to incorporate that feedback, or what would that look like? Or are we just doing a straight bylaw amendment for the subdivision?
Mayor, not really seeing at the pilot stage exactly how to incorporate that correctly in the bylaw. I think what the comments more pertain to amenity contribution, which yeah, I'm asking for some clarity from council. And I'll be totally honest, this is the first rezoning I've gone through with adding an amenity like that. So at this moment, I don't totally have a great answer as to kind of how and when that's added.
Okay, I see Mr. Martin in the back with the hand up.
Just thank you to the chair. I think just one of the things we were looking for was, that process direction to draft the bylaws and for that first reading. And then as well, looking for, the feedback from council in terms of seeking an amenity, seeking direction to proceed with the bylaw or not. So that feedback was what we were looking for.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. So let's get the recommendation. We've had many questions. So let's get the recommendation on the floor and then we can actually debate and dispense with the recommendation from there. Councilor Saunders.
I'm happy to read the recommendation. Do we want the recommendation to be amended in any way to address the amenities conditions? Or should we just get this recommendation out there and then work on it?
I think if we get the recommendation, so the reason why I'm suggesting this is that I think if we get the recommendation moved and seconded, we can have a debate and discussion on what that drafting actually looks like. And then from there, it's going to come back to a first reading and notice for referrals and things like that.
And I'd like to recommend that council direct staff to draft amendment bylaws. To amend the zoning and official community plan designation for 1360 Mount Garden Road. And return to council for consideration for first reading.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor Morris, followed by Councilor Craigs.
I just wanted to say, I think in past, the standard process would be that we would have a separate motion that said, ask directed staff to go and discuss the amenities with the applicant. And then come back at first reading with some sort of response. And then if there'd be a covenant put on to ensure that those things happened prior to fourth reading.
Maybe I'll look at
Before we give
the,
it fourth reading, so I wouldn't want to amend this motion at all, just leave it the way it is, do the discussion about what we might want as a separate item.
maybe just to the corporate, any comment on process around this?
Yeah, so in the past, I believe, the planner has taken council's feedback. So you could make a resolution to direct that specifically, but I think, it's generally understood within the process that, that you would be, considering that as part of the drafting of the bylaw.
Thank you for that. Councilor Fast.
Thank you. This is an interesting proposal, and of course, I know Rosie Montgomery. Rosie's been active in, excuse me, agriculture and all kinds of wonderful cultural community supports. So this is, I don't want to deal with anything to do with how wonderful Rosie and the family is, but this is about the parcel of land and how the vision of this proposal fits in with the vision of Bowen Island, excuse me, in our official community plan. And right now, by amending the official community plan, we'd be taking agriculture away as a primary use. You know, there's various things I could say here, but and I realize farm succession is tricky, as is any kind of succession. And I see it as a precedent for densification of that Mount Gardner neighborhood, which is one of the more rural, old Bowen kind of feeling neighborhoods there. And that's something that the planner mentioned in his report could be a possibility. I think on Bowen, I think we need to protect agriculture, particularly as we come into, or potential for agriculture and growing things that you can sell, growing potentially food, growing potentially other products that people could buy. And I think especially in these times, I think we need to think about the future and what potentially Bowen might need. I'm concerned that if we direct staff to draft these amendment bylaws, that we'd be providing an incentive to clear land, because we have a conservation development policy in place to protect nature on properties. Maybe we need another one to protect agricultural potential, because right now this is agricultural potential. I think that would be going away because you'd be putting a house in the middle of one of the formerly producing areas, if I'm not mistaken. And I can see that if there is an ability to subdivide, rezone cleared land for housing smaller lots, that's not in line with what I read in the official community plan and in the Bowen Islands vision for the future, or the Islands Trust. I think the rural character is part of what's being preserved and protected. And I think the idea of amenities as I wrote it down somewhere here, but the idea of providing amenities as an incentive is also a precedent where people could clear their land and think about, well, how much will I have to pay in order to get my subdivision? Whereas I think we should be guided by the official community plan and all the public process that went into that about preserving rural character. I realize that housing is a need, but Bowen Island is in the Islands Trust area, which was set aside to preserve and protect rural character. We've got other reports in this agenda that say that there's enough capacity for lots to meet the province's targets for housing, or as directed by the province. And I think there's other problems bearing down on us, including biodiversity loss and climate change and all the chaos south of the border that may, that may be coming, is what I'm trying to say. And I think I don't think that this is a good idea. Maybe at some point we will have a policy in place for agricultural conservation development or something like that. But right now, Parks, Trails and Greenways Committee found no conservation assets to apply that policy. I just think that if we go ahead with making this change so an elder can age in place, I respect that, but we're here to look at the land and we're here to think about the future of the land. And I think we should follow the official community plan, and I can't support the recommendation currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. Councillor Jurgensen, followed by Councillor Saunders.
Through the chair, planner, totally understand the need for age in place. But going to Councillor Fast, concerned about the agriculture's principal use. Is there any way that in the rezoning process, principal use for agriculture could be preserved across both those lots
Councillor
as a
Jurgensen,
possible principal use?
sorry, I interrupted you on that last.
Oh, I was just saying as a possible principal use.
I would say the existing zoning, zone variation we propose already exists, but we could propose just a slightly different zone variation that had the same sizing, but added agriculture as a principal use.
Thank you.
Councillor Saunders, Councillor Getty, Councillor Morse.
Thank you. Through the chair. I think it's inevitable when we discuss anything here that there's going to be goals in opposition to each other. You can't help it, in this role, we're going to see that. And the goal of preserving the agricultural use of this land is that it's a worthy goal and it's valid. Having said that, one of our major goals throughout this term has been trying to improve on the housing situation. It's a minimal improvement, but it is an improvement. And I guess fundamentally, without trying to balance going too far in one direction or another, fundamentally, I want to look at what helps people the most. He said altruistically, which and this seems to be more a people issue than a land issue for me. I understand the Councillor Fast's argument of what this is about the land, and I respect that argument. It just, for me, sometimes it's more about people and the long-term need of us to develop a little more housing and frankly, we're not talking about a 4-story complex with 15 units or something. We're talking about somebody being able to find their way to stay here on the island, as all of us would like to do, I think, over the long term. So I'm going to be in support of this for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. So Councillor Getty, Councillor Morse, Councillor Jurgensen.
I think I'm in favor of this resolution at this point. I'd like to move it along and at least get some sort of a bylaw that we can open it up for debate. I would like some help with understanding. I'm not familiar with the conservation development policy, if that could be included in the staff report. I'd like the idea of a site visit in terms of having some idea if agriculture is as a primary use is changed in these two designations, then I might help in terms of seeing what the extent of the possibilities are. I haven't been on that property for 30 years, when, back in the day when we were planting lavender all over the island, but I'm not sure what the potential is in terms of whether or not we're actually removing a sizable chunk of potentially agricultural land. So I'm in favor of this resolution just to keep them all moving and have some idea of what the amenities might be and whether or not that can be negotiated.
Thank you, Councilor Getty. Councilor Morris.
A couple of things. I noticed that domestic agriculture is one of the accessory uses and agriculture is not permitted. So I'm curious as to what and don't bother now, but for the next report, what domestic agriculture means. And this property is not in the ALR, is it? And that's another question. And if we're really concerned about wanting agriculture to flourish on the island, we should be looking at all the properties that are in the ALR that are not being used for agriculture.
Thank you, Councilor Morris. Councilor Jurgensen.
To the chair, mentioned in the report that there is, if I understood correctly, a site that's already been proposed for secondary building on what would be the new lot. Is that something that the applicant could go forward with right now if they so chose? Could they build a second house on that spot without doing the subdivision? Not suggesting that they should, but just trying to understand how subdividing it would change the potential.
Councilor Jurgensen, so they already have the principal dwelling on the property, definitely can't build any additional principal residences. But yeah, like any, especially after Bill 44 in BC, so they can build a either attached suite or a detached secondary suite. So hypothetically, they could build a detached secondary suite in that location. I should note as well, they'd already mentioned there's an existing garage on the property, and they've already mentioned possibly turning that into a detached secondary suite in the future. And it sounded like that was regardless of whether or not the rezoning goes ahead. Yeah, so it's worth noting.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Councilor Wake.
I'd like to support this on the understanding that, well, I have the understanding that there's confusion around exactly what the potential and the ability to force agriculture to take place on the land. And it seems strange to me that one house site is going to remove the attractiveness of the entire two properties for agriculture. So we've had a lot of talk about conditions, and I think one of the conditions could just be that we support as much agriculture as possible on this property once it's been subdivided.
All right, thank you, Ken. So from my chair, I don't have any problem supporting this at present, given that we're not even at a first reading yet. My encouragement to staff would be to look at the feedback of committees and see the best way that can be included. I think the discussion here has been, whichever way it goes, I think the discussion here has been robust. And my belief is that, yes, there are environmental and ecological and land-based concerns that our council is tasked with being responsible for, but you know, that also balances with the sociological concerns of what it means to be residents on this island and to share this island together. And I think there is a middle ground there somewhere. So I'm curious to see what comes back for first reading, as well as the OCP amendment. In terms of the zoning, I mean, it loses agriculture as a principal use, but agriculture wasn't the only principal use that I read on the existing zoning, because there's dwelling, stable, kennel there as well, things like portable sawmills and mini storage lots for the larger properties. So I think there's a range of uses that the land has, and you know, I'm loath on an island where people want to do what they want with their properties to you know, shut them into one principal use when 4 of them are on the zoning as it is. And so with that, I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor that that council direct staff to draft the amendment in the OCP amendment. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
Nay.
And that carries with Councillor Fast in opposition.
We'll schedule a site visit.
Yes, and I'll leave it to staff to schedule a site visit.
I don't know if you call this a point of order or I just want to say something briefly. But hearing when Councillor Fast was speaking to that motion, I think she's the only one that noticed about that one of her statements. I kind of rolled my eyes, and that was really unprofessional. Worse, it's bad manners, and I apologize for that.
Thank you, Councillor Summers. Moving on to 8.1 staff reports, we have a ferry marshalling pilot program. We have Doug Woods, our bylaw service supervisor, joining us here today.
Not sure if everyone had a chance to read the report or not. Do you want to have any background or anything, or can we go straight? We're just looking for a discussion today about going ahead with the proposed hiring.
Yes, so maybe just for context and for the record and for folks that are watching and to get on the record, I'm curious if you can sort of describe what the pilot program looks like, the levels of staffing, and sort of what kind of service can be expected if the pilot program is approved.
We're going from the model of what was used in previous years. So we're going to have, I think the primary difference is we're looking at having 2 people hired. Have to work out the details about how it's all going to work, but I would like to see 2 people on during each shift, whether they're at the same time, whether they're overlapping in some way. And the timing of it would be weekends and holidays between, say, May long weekend through to Labor Day, possibly Thanksgiving, depending on how it turns out. So a similar calendar to previous years, just with a little bit more coverage, ideally.
Okay.
And on top of that, also the on-call factor, it would be nice to be able to have that capacity depending on people's availability, et cetera.
And then that weekend coverage, that full day coverage, like what are the hours that you would
In
anticipate?
the past, it's been the 4-hour shifts.
Okay.
So it really does depend on how far the budgeting goes and what sort of cost sharing we can expect from BC Ferries. That's another aspect of why we want to get this decision as soon as possible, so we can start pursuing not only the hiring, but giving BC Ferries some time to consider their involvement in whatever we propose as well.
Okay. And then, yeah, I'll just rip some questions here from the chair. Are so these ferry marshals that we're hiring, will they be empowered as bylaw officers? Are they able to do things like write tickets for folks that are parked at crosshatches or
No,
things like that? Okay.
no, but what they can do obviously is they can document anything like that. Yeah, we can obviously provide enforcement after the fact if we can't be there during. But we will be having, we have all our staff hired now, and we're gonna have weekend shifts. So bylaw will be around and will also be trained in traffic management.
Okay. Councilor Saunders.
Two things. One is the bylaw that you just said is around, does it have enforcement included in it? Like, right, is there an ability to enforce in any way?
Yeah, I'm talking about the bylaw officer that will be working.
Okay, but when I say enforcement, is there a mechanism to do more than say, please move your car?
Certainly, yeah.
Okay, great.
As long as,
Yeah.
if they're contravening our bylaw.
Yeah, okay, so there is something like $20 fine or whatever, but there's
50.
Okay, that's fine. There's provisions there. That's fine. My only other question was you mentioned I think in December, you reported that you went out to got 3 bids for third party or several bids for third party, and they were like 130,000, I think is the highest one. What was the difference in hours between what was bid and then what you're suggesting for the funding that we have?
Those ones, I think we were looking at as close to an all-day scenario with those as we could. So up to say 12 hours coverage in a day.
Right.
Which of course didn't influence that final.
Yeah,
count.
exactly.
But I think a lot of the costs were also due to things like accommodations and deals.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Getty, followed by Councilor Morris.
Okay, so this is, as far as I understand it, this is money that's in reserves. It's some sort of a grant that we can redirect to this sort of thing, and that this allocation would pay for all of it, and we might get, if we're really, really, really lucky, some contribution from BC Ferries that would supplement it or would take over some of this.
I would certainly be rooting for 50% cost sharing at the very least.
Would that add to the program in terms of hours? Or
it could
numbers of
potentially, yeah.
Okay. And there's training at the Justice Institute in terms of traffic control. Is that part of the program
Yes,
for these people?
yeah, I think I go through BCMSA and find training courses that way. So that's how we've trained the last couple of bylaw officers.
And I've noticed some new posters that are around on some of the new garbage boxes outside the library and down at the ferry that have a nice diagram explaining to people how to line up and what the crosshatches are and things like that. So is that going to be expanded? Is there money in this in terms of greater coverage of that information? Somehow?
I don't know what we've got planned in terms of further public postering that way. I know we have the brochures that those are based on. And of course, anyone who's doing the flagging work would have access to stacks of those that they could be handing out as needed
I
to.
think the first billboard on Bowen, but the size of that window. Right. Lastly, if I may, is there any kind of a uniform or some sort of a designation, or is it just sort of the yellow jackets or the orange jackets?
Well, there's legal requirements for what the traffic people have to wear. They have to wear reflective vests. They have to wear cuffs on their wrists and ankles.
So there's not going to be any arguments in terms of who are you and how dare you talk to me?
I would hope not. I would hope not. I would hope they would, and we could get branded municipal logos on these vests, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Or not. Depending on how.
Sorry, the only reason I shake my head is that if it's BIM branded, then it begins to look like BIM is responsible for ferry marshaling when we're not.
We've never had any kind of branding like that. So.
Councilor Bass.
Thank you.
My apologies, Councilor Morris, followed by Councilor Bass.
Councilor Bass, go ahead, I just wanted to make sure I was on the list.
Absolutely. Councilor Fast.
Okay. Thank you for the good report. It's easy to understand. I'm in support of the idea you hiring, since the other plans aren't going to be possible this year with the previous contracts. And I like the wording about a one-time pilot project. This gives you a chance to assess how it's going. Who knows what's going to happen with travel within Canada this year? Seems like people are more interested in buying Canadian Canadian Together. I hope that sometime we could consider the idea of congestion pricing. Seems to be a popular idea in New York City anyway, and some other huge cities. We're not huge, but maybe that's a possibility that can be explored, looking at future years, not this year, obviously. And in terms of trying to ease the crunch times. And I think this will help support the idea that we're a walk-on island from the point of view of people coming here. And if we can keep the multi-use path going and that kind of thing, it all contributes to the not inviting more cars and more vehicles onto the ferry, which I think is all. Anyway, I look forward to how the pilot project happens and what kinds of creative ideas or observations come through. I'd be interested in seeing what people notice and what people in the lineup ask about. Seems to be people ask, where do we pay? Anyway, okay, so I'm in support.
Thank you, Councilor Fast. Councilor Morse, followed by Councilor Wake.
Well, I'm not so sure. So how much did we pay last year in total for, including for the people that,
Our 50%.
or, well, what was the total bill? And how much did BC Ferries pay?
Exact figures with me.
It's about $9,000 that we pay for the limited opportunities for coverage, which are those
So
long weekend
18,
days.
so if BC Ferries paid half, then we're roughly talking about $18,000 to $20,000.
No, the total, because the coverage is much less scope of coverage.
Well, I was asking that partly so I
So
could get a
about
feel for
$9,000.
what coverage.
About $9,000 and BC Ferries pays up to $5,000.
This is going to give us 5 times the coverage of what last year gave us. Way to look at it. I really am feeling uncomfortable about letting BC Ferries off the hook with this, and we've got lots of other things we could use that money for. Now, can people actually issue tickets, be issued after the fact? Like if somebody parks on the hatch line, our bylaw says you can't do that. Can they be given a ticket after the fact? As long as that's properly documented.
Yes, yeah, there's a few things there.
And the same for people that are pulling in and parking in the lineup and going in to get coffee and then leaving.
Yep.
They can be ticketed after the fact.
Yep,
Okay,
as long as it's properly documented.
okay. And then in your report, you mentioned marshalling issues such as line jumping. If I recall correctly, our use of streets bylaw allows people to go down and fill in any space.
That's a little different than line jumping. Line jumping would be, for example, someone coming off of Dorman Road while the ferry's loading and just pulling into line and getting on the boat.
Ah, okay, thank you. That's totally different understanding of what line jumping is then, so it's. Okay. And I guess we're approving this now, not as part of the budget. And I'm not sure whether people, whether they shouldn't have some sort of identification, maybe a name badge or something. So that, well, is this somebody who's thrown on an orange jacket and is directing traffic, or who are they, are they working for us or are they working for BC Ferries? And, yeah, because I. Okay, I'll think about my vote.
Thank you, Councilor Morse. Councilor Saunders.
No, I think I had my 2 cents.
Oh, Councilor Wake.
Thank you.
Something. One of the two gentlemen over there.
Somebody, yeah.
Through the chair. So we've budgeted this not to exceed $46,000. If BC Ferries puts in nothing, how many hours in a day will that 46,000 cover?
It covers approximately 2 shifts, 7 hours a day on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, each weekend from Labor Day, from May long weekend through to Thanksgiving.
Okay, and then if BC Ferries is willing to kick in, are we reducing our amount here or are we expanding the program even further?
Just that would depend on operational needs that become apparent since we are already expanding it through what we're proposing here.
I think we've got to get started on this and it's been well presented. I'll be in favor.
Councillor Fast, or by Councillor Getty?
Just a short comment, a suggestion for the branding on, or a logo on the vests could be Bowen Island Municipality on behalf of BC Ferries. I don't expect you to take that seriously, but maybe we should. What could happen?
Councillor Getty?
I'd be interested in entertaining something that looked like a BC Ferries uniform. And, or investing in a quantity of yellow ribbon and I'll put it down the side seam and the legs of the pants. It'll look like RCMP. But we'll figure it out. I'm
Now
in
we're
favor of
just-
this resolution.
Yes, so I'm in favor of the resolution. I think it's much needed. I continue to be incredibly disappointed that BC Ferries has not come to the table to fund this at all. The caveats that I have is that I would add to the motion that BC Ferries be formally requested to reimburse BIM for the costs incurred by the pilot project, up to $100,000. Because as it stands right now, I think this is still a stopgap measure, 7 hours a day on just weekends. I anticipate is not going to be enough. It does seem like the Ferry Corporation is starting to get the message that they need to make changes. I know that they've released a new schedule for the island that is significantly different than past schedules in the summer that incorporates more unloading and loading time between sailings. But this is part of their operational domain. So I would love to have a motion that allows me to represent to BC Ferries that we're paying for this. We'd like to pay more for it. We'll do it for you, but we don't want to pay for it. Because in addition to this, I think it's also worthwhile to mention that in addition to this, I understand that we have MRN funding that's going to be dedicated to,
So
things
what
like
is MRN?
MRN, Major Roadway Network funding, or Municipal Road Network funding. It's grant funding for our road network that is, if I'm not mistaken, going to be applied to, repainting the thermal markings on Snug Cove. So we're doing various jobs for them in terms of everything from wayfinding to signage to lane markings and now ferry marshalling, which does not happen in any other community in the province, which is absolutely ridiculous. And for a community with a tax base of 4,200 people that has to do its own ferry marshalling, we don't build bus interchanges for TransLink. We don't build playgrounds for schools. It's a jurisdictional issue that does not seem to be sinking in. So I'm content if there's $46,000 and change to put into this that's in a reserve somewhere. But again, I don't feel that it's going to be enough if we need to add on call hours or if things get particularly snarled down there or if we have ferry cancellations again this summer. So I believe that there does likely need to be some flexibility to add to that funding, that then we can take a number back to BC Ferries and say, this is what it's going to cost to do this. We'll do it, but you should pay for it. Is the direction that I'd like to go in. Councillor Fast.
If I think I captured your words, so I'd like to add it to and I'll read the recommendation. Sure. The council directs staff to proceed with recruitment of peak season dedicated part-time ferry marshalling staff as proposed in the 2029 financial plan to be funded as a one-time pilot project from accumulated operating surplus, and that BC Ferries be asked to reimburse Bowen Island Municipality for the pilot project up to $100,000.
Yes, I would just massage the language in that second part a little bit before it gets seconded. So I have that BC Ferries be formally requested to reimburse Bowen Island Municipality for the costs incurred by this pilot project up to $100,000.
Formally requested is way better.
So I'm gonna go to the CFO.
Perhaps if it could just be added that, perhaps that staff be directed to prepare a letter for the mayor's signature. I think it's important that it becoming government to government.
So the staff, so the BC Ferries, so the second part to the corporate officer, the BC Ferries be formally requested, comma, by a letter from the mayor, comma, reimburse BIM for the costs incurred by this pilot project, et cetera, et cetera. Does that capture it? Okay. I see, so Councillor Jurgensen has not been in the speakers list yet. So, oh, seconded by Councillor Getty. And then Councillor Jurgensen followed by Councillor Morse.
Withdrawn.
Withdrawn. Oh, were you looking a second?
Yes.
Oh, my apologies. Seconded by Councillor Jurgensen.
So I just have a question on the $100,000.
Mhm.
The budget is only showing 46,000.
Mhm.
So are we now going to amend the budget to show 100,000 so that you can actually spend that money? Or are we only going to spend that money if BC Ferries, that your motion is that they reimburse us?
Yeah, so I can motivate on that. So the motion as it's read is, there's the original part of the motion for peak season dedicated part-time marshalling staff as proposed in the 2025-2029 budget,
Yeah.
which is the $46,000.
But except,
Can I finish?
Yeah,
please?
okay.
Thank you. And so the second part of the motion is requesting a reimbursement to BIM of up to $100,000.
right,
So we'll see if they come back. If they want to take it and there's more money in the pot, then we have more money to spend.
but they can't reimburse us if we haven't spent the money and we don't, with the way the budget's written right now, have the authority to spend anything more than 46,000.
Right, but there would need to be some sort of service agreement written between BC Ferries and the municipality, which could be up to $100,000.
Well, then you can't say reimburse. You've got to change the wording in the resolution. To say BC Ferries be formally approached to reimburse for the one-time pilot and provide extra money to expand the program up to $100,000. And that's where if they pay, if they paid us $100,000, we don't have the authority to spend any more than 46, the way the budget's written.
Right, I'll go to our CFO.
The wording could be, instead of using the word reimburse, make the request to ask that they fund a program with a cost of up to $100,000. The second part of your question, Councillor Morse, is would council authorize the municipality to expend more than $46,000 if the answer from BC Ferries was no? And if we put in the budget $100,000, then you're giving that express authorization at this point. So I would recommend that you leave it at 46 in the budget and see how it goes. If there's there's an opportunity for staff to provide sort of a midsummer update to council to let you know how it's going and how we see it rolling out. And we could provide further advice or recommendations at that time.
Or if we put 400,000 in the budget with the subject that this will only be spent if we receive 53,000 and some change from BC Ferries.
We can amend it.
So I did hear, if I'm reading the comment correctly, possible amendment says the BC Ferries be formally requested to fund the costs incurred by this pilot project.
Yeah.
Maybe or by letter to the mayor.
Up to $100,000.
Or just leave it
Yeah.
blank, and then we can go on a negotiation with them and second the amendment. So let's get that read back just so everybody understands.
That BC Ferries be formally requested by a letter from the mayor to fund the costs incurred by the pilot program up to $100,000.
Could it be pilot project? Because that's what it's called.
Just leave the money out, just say fund the costs incurred by the pilot program.
Yeah, I think leave the money out.
So that would be the sentence ending at, the full sentence would be that BC Ferries be formally requested by a letter from the mayor to fund the costs incurred by the pilot.
Yes. At this point, all we have is $46,000, and that might not be enough, but we can take that up, BC Ferries.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, both of those motions together. Is there any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hands. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Woods. Next up, the main event, 2025 budget updates. Kristen Watson, Chief Financial Officer, joins us here. So who? Oh, Councilor Dickinson.
Yeah, sorry, the chair. This is more a point of access than anything. I just want to understand it for the context of your presentation. The library budget, I wasn't able to find within the rest of the budget. Is that a separate budget? Or is that a sub-budget, or is it laid out in there? I just want to make sure I'm not missing it.
We just show the library budget as a one-line transfer to library and then include them as a department. The library did come forth to council with a detailed presentation for their budget in the fall. I believe it was November. Certainly I can find that presentation and send it to you in an email to make sure that you did get to see it.
I did get to see that one. I just wasn't sure how it was reflected in the bigger
Yes.
thing budget.
No, it's included as a one-line transfer to that department.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They're not a department as much as a separate entity, right?
Correct, yeah. They do have control over all those funds once council approves their annual budget. Okay, thank you. Through the mayor, to the rest of council, I wanted to take this opportunity to provide you with a little mid-process update on where we're at with the budget so far. There have been some changes that I've included. There's been some things taken out. There's been a few things added, and I put in this report a table that summarizes all of the changes that have been included to date in this draft number 2 of the budget. Obviously, council did direct staff in January to come forward with a new remuneration policy to be considered. However, it was made clear that any changes to the remuneration policy should not take effect until 2026 and 2027, when the new council comes into power. The impacts on this year's budget, which did include a potential increment to mayor and council remuneration beginning in 2025. The impact of that change is to reduce the current year tax levy by $68,000. Another direct impact of recommendations from council that have been, or from committees that have been provided to council, include removing the misting stations from the emergency planning project budget. And that had the impact of reducing the current year tax levy by another $17,000. Those two single things together result in a 1% reduction to the current year tax levy. So that's going from 9.5 down to 8.5. So that's where we're at now. There's been a whole rash of small additions, small reductions that most of them are either funded by grant or funded through some other source of revenue that doesn't impact the tax levy. And I've enumerated those changes there. Some of them are also changes that have resulted from just getting further along in the financial year-end work process, having a better idea of what the actual spend will be in 2025, given that the early estimates are just that. They're based on estimates, based on my best guess of where we're going to be. For example, the community center, back in December, I figured we still had another $1.2 million to go. As it turns out, we only have $1.1 million to go. So I've made those kinds of really just housekeeping changes. I've also added things to the budget, going through and combing through the feedback that has been gleaned so far from the public, or things that I've seen on, say, Facebook discussions or things. When I see people are raising issues, I like to try and make sure that I've addressed it somewhere in the material that council gets to read, so that you two know that it's also been considered, or it's been included somehow. We've made a accommodation for it. So some of the recurrent themes or things that have come forward as proposals from committees. Of course, there's the 2-year Hearth proposal for the contract and production coordinator position. There was some discussion about the public art project and contributing to that public art reserve. I did hear some feedback about the police tax reserve contribution. So things like that, I've consolidated those into this chart too, and as well just tried to provide council with some information about why it was or was not included, or what the impact would be on the property tax levy if this were left out, or if this was to go forward. So I think what I want to make sure that I get from council is a clear instruction as to what will be needed at the next council meeting for council to be in a position to give direction to staff to come forward with a bylaw that includes a tax levy of X. So some of the things that I've collected, of course, council's going to need a clear collection of all of the public feedback to date. Council's going to want to make sure that they feel that they've had adequate opportunity to consider the requests for the additional FTE positions. I believe that council will need to consider what the long-term contribution to our reserve fund plan looks like. I want to make sure that you're aware and that you understand the funding for the projects for our new capital projects. So are these projects, are they new initiatives, or are they more targeted towards replacement and renewal? I'm going to make sure that council has that clear understanding of what those capital expenditures are. Councillor Morse asked me today for a spreadsheet that identifies the capital projects and their funding sources in one clear spreadsheet. So I'll make sure that I present that too. And the last thing, to your point, Councillor Jurgensen, about the library budget. It is important that council is aware that inherent in the library budget is the addition of a new FTE this year. So this year that FTE is being funded through their dedicated library surplus, but that funding source will be exhausted in 2 years. So 2 years down the road, it's going to come back to council whether that FTE funding for that position will then continue on going forward to be funded from the municipal budget. So it is important that council's aware of those and aware of those repercussions and knows that that decision will be made 2 years down the road. So is there any messaging that needs to be communicated to the library board from council about that? So if I'm missing anything, or if there's anything else that council needs before for our next meeting on March 24th, where I will be coming forward seeking direction to draft a budget bylaw. If there's anything else outside of those particular things that I've just kind of described, I would request that council provide me with that feedback so that I could make sure that that all of the information is included for you to be able to be in a position to provide that direction to staff.
Councillor Morse.
Just a slight correction. I asked if there was a spreadsheet available. So thank you for offering to prepare.
It's a great idea, and I'll make sure that I include it.
I was trying to find all the public comments, just sort of, do you know how many people showed up for the various budget meetings?
The one that we held in the day was one person. I'll have to check to see how many views it had on the YouTube channel since then. The one in the evening was better. We had some good feedback and we had a little bit of good discussion at that meeting too. And there were probably 4 or 5 people that showed up or were in the room to watch that one.
So where do we find, was that recorded so we can go back and watch and see ourselves?
Yes.
The,
yeah, they're on our YouTube
I'll just
channel.
click on the,
And they're on our budget page. There's a link to those meetings on the budget page.
Well, I've got the budget page up here and I was looking for something. And then the discussion board it looks like from the budget page, there were only 2 comments.
Yeah, it was very
Okay. All right.
not particularly well used.
So there is so were these comments in your there's recurrent themes and public feedback? Were those from the 2 meetings?
I
Were
would
you
say
on the
more of them.
Facebook page.
I would say more of them came either through direct emails to the budget@BIMBC email. Although most of the email feedback was also copied direct to mayor and council. So I will say that you have received the majority of the email feedback. And then there were also themes that I'd seen on that Facebook.
On the phone and everything else.
Yes.
Page. Okay, thank you. Okay. I was just wanting to track have a look at how much information and actually see the comments. So there isn't a written summary other than this.
I'm going to provide that on the March 24th meeting. Yeah.
And so out of today's meeting, what's expressly being looked for?
2 things. One is establishing, I didn't speak to it yet, but it is the setting of the parcel tax review panel meeting, which is required in order to adopt any new parcel tax bylaws. I am proposing that a new parcel tax bylaw be proposed. It was introduced at the utility meeting committee of the whole last week for King Edward Bay local service area. So in order to do that, we do require that parcel tax review panel meeting be held. So I am proposing that be held on, I think, April 24th, that's 4 p.m. And secondly, I did outline a list of things that I will commit to preparing and bringing forward to the next council meeting on March 24th. I'm seeking some feedback from council today to ensure that that's adequate, or is there something that's been left out that you will require in order to provide direction to staff about what tax rate increase you would be comfortable with.
Councilor Getty.
So, I spent the better part of yesterday, going through, the original document that we got on, January in terms of the nice glossy colored pictures, description from the different departments. And I haven't had a chance to, double check that with the material that you gave us today in the spreadsheet, but, I'm concerned with respect to what's happening south of us and what that is going to, how that might play out. And I think that it would be very important to follow the example of the province in terms of possibly putting a freeze on hiring staff or expanding on staff. And I would like more reports from either HR or the CAO or possibly yourself in terms of what the effect would be on staffing from the different department heads if there was a freeze on any of those positions or a deferral. I also think that if one of the principles that I think that council needs to consider is if there is an economic downturn and where the communities start to suffer, then one of the principles is, are we going to put a lot of effort into maintaining staff and salaries and benefits and try to put some energy into helping people in the community, or is the priority going to be on reducing the tax bill so that the larger community doesn't have to bear the brunt? And I think that's the whole issue that we have to discuss in terms of what a deferral of staffing might mean. And that's, I think, a discussion that has to happen before we finally deal with the budget. I'm also concerned about one of the things that Councillor Saunders mentioned earlier is that we had committed to finishing up some programs and not necessarily starting things. So I'm not sure if that was your answer to Councillor Morris's question, but it would help to figure out what are new programs and what are continuing. And if we did reduce and defer some of the new things, what effect that would have on the tax bill. I have concerns about, and I asked the question about whether we could defer payments into reserves. A lot of these things are coming out of reserves. That's a tax that has been collected in the past. If we defer some of those things like the staff vehicle to, you know, the description was to pick up consultants and visitors at the ferry and to make various site visits. And the other one was the utility vehicle to help with snow plowing at the fire hall. And not relying on public works utility vehicles, and that if those could be deferred, then we wouldn't necessarily have to backfill the reserves. And we might be able to defer that, is my understanding. It's something that we could do in terms of cutting back on things. I asked about the housing accelerator fund and got that explained to me, and the business about getting BC Ferries to contribute for that TransLink. We're using our TransLink OMR funding for the painting in the cove. And if we did get a better contribution or any contribution from BC Ferries, there are other capital, it's restricted funds, but there are other capital things that we could use that on. If we didn't, for transportation specifically.
Very limited.
Right. Okay, so then, I would like to, have a report from the CAO with respect to the, potential workaround and deferring any of the hires. And, we talked earlier about the bylaw enforcement of, for the ferry marshalling. Just discuss that. I think we need to have a very close look in terms of what, if anything, we can use for the deferral of the work yard. That's a substantial amount, and I'm not sure that we're covering that in reserves, and whether or not what that is going to look like. It's not on this year's budget, but it is a massive amount that is being deferred. And I think that and the police major costs are something that we have to figure out how we're going to afford. So, and I guess anything that can be deferred is I think a priority for me at this point, either dropping it or deferring it, some of the capital things for the different departments. And I'd like a much better explanation in terms of the staffing. We've got a 4.9 increase that may or may not be justified. I think that we're going to get a lot of pushback from that. That just about covers it. Quickly reading the 3-page letter that I wrote. The answers that I got back.
Thank you, Councilor Getty. There's somebody else on the speakers list. Councilor Morse.
Sorry about that. The incomplete works fund. Is there a list of what the incomplete works are that make up that number?
No, they are budget provisions that were set aside in prior years that then when the project didn't take place, they're just the residual that was left over.
So none of that is for projects that are in progress.
No, it's unallocated reserve of surplus.
Okay. And so there's several 100,000 in there then.
200 and something.
Oh, I'm looking at your budget and it's talking about, there's, so the 78,000 that's earmarked in 2027 for the multi-use path is nothing to do with another project that, so if it's projects that were budgeted for, why isn't it just transferred into
I
unappropriated?
can't tell you that because the money that went in there was recorded by the previous CAO, and I just haven't been able to track down the detail on any of that. So it's just been a little fund that's been sitting there and it's been used to fund things, for example, like the additional paving at the fire hall that happened last year, things like that.
So looking at the, using accumulated operating surplus, the last item on page 2 of the report, $100,000 for, the balance of the outstanding Tunstall Bay Reservoir loan.
Yep.
Why isn't the parcel tax covering it?
We decided that we didn't want to turn it into a 5-year structured bond debenture because the parcel tax was going to be very high. So we decided that we would keep it in short-term financing, which is like a line of credit. It's a variable rate loan. If you're not borrowing those dollars and you're able to kind of internally fund amounts like that a little bit, it makes more sense because those long-term bond floats, the interest never goes down. You pay the same amount of interest for the entire period and you don't get to reap the savings of as you reduce your principal, more of your payment goes, or, you know, more of your payment pays down the debt. So I think it's the best way if we can afford to internally fund some of these smaller capital projects that are needed in the water systems, given the small numbers of people that have to pay for these projects. It's a really effective way in order to minimize the cost to those local area service groups.
So basically, the parcel tax is going to continue then?
Yes, we're gonna keep it on for an extra year or two until it's paid off, but we do have to.
So that's the
repay
part
the
that
debt.
wasn't clear in your note, that the parcel
Gotcha.
tax was going to
Thanks, yeah,
continue.
I get it.
Councilor Saunders.
Thank you. To the chair, I'm just looking at the police reserve fund. He's putting in there, which we chose to do a year or two ago, which is a great idea. We totally see the need for it. Some time ago, and I think it might have been a UBCM a year and a half ago, we started to talk about trying to discuss with the province ways to defray that future cost, not have it all hit at once. And we also talked about like maybe, you know, kind of gradually implementing it or something. And we also talked about ways that maybe we could discuss with other communities in the same situation. If there's a kind of approach we could all take that might help us all. Have we gone anywhere with that, or has there been any further discussion along those lines?
There's always discussion about it, but it doesn't seem to make any.
It never moves.
No, it never really moves.
Okay.
And I can share with you that my conversations with other CFOs at the smaller municipalities is that the experience doesn't seem to be well planned. There isn't a lot of information available either from the province or from the RCMP about the potential costs that they could be looking at. I think because the way police services are funded now is they're all pooled and they're collected and then paid for by the province for all of the smaller towns. So there's probably not a lot of I don't wanna opine why it is, but essentially you just need to be ready to be slapped with a bill for $1 million when and you better make sure that you've gotten your community to that level of taxation ahead of time. So
Right.
that's what we're doing, because it's not like we don't pay for police services now. We pay about close to $600,000 a year now for police services. But what we need to be prepared for is that it's going to go somewhere north of $1 million once
Right.
we go over 5,000.
Just one follow-up on that, and you may or may not know this. I know the population based on most recent census,
Yeah.
that'll be 2026.
Right.
And then the next one after that's 2031, I believe.
Right.
So does that cost not incur till 2031?
That's right.
Okay, good.
So yeah, we are we're hedging our bets that 2026 will still be under.
No
5,000.
home sales between now and the.
Right? Send all your kids to university.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Council Beck.
Thanks. Through the chair, just reflecting on Councillor Getty's comments. And actually the fact that I was pretty excited to see it, this looks like we're forecasting only an 8.5% increase, not a 9.5% increase. You mentioned a 1% reduction, but then 2026, the 9.5 is up from 9.7. And in 2027, the 5.0 is up to 5.7. And I'm just not sure it's prudent. We're in this for the long haul, and saving money in the short run, although it looks like that's all been saved in the 2025 budget. It's been saved by moving a lot of things around, not increasing taxes. Well, I guess it is 1% less taxes, but deferring new FTEs. I would like to hear a report from the department heads or the CFO on what the impact of that might be. That those are the sorts of things. I mean, we've always got people in the community saying, "Oh man, there's too many staff." But you know, what are they basing that on? They're not working there. They're not seeing. So I think we need to be really careful about deferring things because things are looking even rough for the next couple of years. I think we should take it 1 year at a time, and I suspect we need most of those FTE additions, but I'd like to,
Thank you, Councilor White. I do have, I'm curious about the FTE conversation. I think that increasing the municipal workforce by 10% is a big lift at any time, no matter the financial context and climate. So I'd really like to make sure we're measuring twice and cutting once, or dotting our I's and crossing our T's, or whatever metaphor is used there. Knowing that we haven't significantly increased FTEs, but at the same time, the community center is becoming more expensive to operate. There might be room here and there to fit it in the existing envelope. We did, reduce the number of committees significantly, which, should free up some overhead as well. So I think there's a worthwhile conversation to have with council to make sure that everybody understands the impact of whatever FTEs we are bringing in, and then we can message that to the community as a sort of united and consensus-based in a united consensus-based way. There are little pieces in here that I think would be worth discussing at the 24th meeting. Aside from the FTEs, the application of the community works reserve, I think, is one that's worth talking about, and its application to the multi-use path, given that community works money can be applied broadly to infrastructure in the community and not just confined to a multi-use path. And given the infrastructure challenge that we're facing, there might be a better application of that funding. I'm still curious about the Hearth proposal and this 2-year contracted production position. I note that in the core services agreement for the Hearth that that contract is up for renegotiation now that the community center is going to be open to be worked on. So I'm curious what that looks like, and especially in service of advancing the cultural master plan, which I don't know if we've heard too much about that this term, or had a report from the Hearth specifically on that. But given that we're looking at moving into 6-figure funding for the Hearth in terms of both their programs as well as this 2-year position, I think it's time that we have maybe a bit more line of sight as a council into what that funding agreement looks like, and the return that the municipality is getting on that in terms of the implementation of the cultural master plan. The ferry marshalling position we've talked about. I note that the inflow and infiltration reduction looks like it's slated to be funded from the Housing Accelerator Fund. I'm curious why the Housing Accelerator Fund and why it's not contained in the local service area I'm asking CFO.
The rationale behind that is that it enables additional connections to increase development potential within Snug Cove. There's no benefit to the existing users. It's pretty hard to try and push that on existing users if the capacity as it exists is sufficient for the existing users' need. And it's the municipality that's driving additional densification. I think it's kind of hard not to justify why. I think it's easy to justify why we would be recommending the use of those funds.
Okay, that's helpful. The only comment I have around the Housing Accelerator Fund generally is that it seems to be money that's bouncing around a couple of ideas right now. So, you know, in the last council meeting, it was, you know, proposed that maybe $1 million of Housing Accelerator Fund could go towards the sewer plant expansion. Now there's Housing Accelerator Fund going into inflow and infiltration reduction, which at the time of application for the fund wasn't even being contemplated at the time. So I think council might need a bit more of a reporting on what is the plan for that that limited amount of money, because it was only, you know, 1.3 million. And how we're tracking with our requirements to that, because we did put it in under some specific conditions, and I think council should all, you know, we should have a broader line of sight into what's happening there. The public works yard is, you know, one of the, I would agree with Councillor Getty that given the financial climate that we're in, and particularly as a working parent myself, I'm feeling both the fear and the stress of that climate at the same time. So I do have concerns about where we are with spending, but I also want to make sure that, you know, we're not having a knee-jerk reaction that's going to kneecap us in the future. But with the public works yard, that's one of those projects that we did commit to doing something about. And we actually haven't heard too much about it come back. So I know that about a year ago, I think we approved about $60,000 in funding to advance the design of that project. And I don't know where that is. So I think in terms of reporting back on March 24th, when we're talking about large capital projects in our 5-year plan, that it would be useful for council to get an update on that, because that will be a significant chunk of budget, and it will need to go to assent and has all sorts of implications there. And then in terms of getting a number down, and I'll put this out here from 9.5 to 8.5. I mean, it is a percent. I am somewhat indifferent to that. You know, I would like to see if we do reduce some of the expenditures and some of the expenses, you know, I'm also okay keeping the number of what it is and putting it into reserves that can be used later, given the uncertainty that we might be facing. I think there are challenges in trying to get numbers down for the sake of getting numbers down that end up hampering the operations of the municipality long term. And I think I think this council is living through some of that. We really find ourselves stretched to fund the initiatives that we want to fund. Someone had their hand up over here. Councillor Dickinson.
When it comes to the budget, I think one piece that really stands out to me of things like public works and other ones of the bigger items is making sure that we're staying with the commitments that we made to, for example, the works yard, some of the working conditions, improving those. Just want to offer that. That's something I think is important.
You can Ferguson. Not seeing any hands up. Any final comments from the CFO before we move on and get recommendations on the floor?
I don't think so. That's some helpful feedback. And so we will make sure to come forth with a wholesome report that addresses all of those additional things that you brought up. I do want to caveat, the agenda cutoff deadline for the 24th is tomorrow. It won't be, it's going to probably be towards the end of the week that we'll be able to get that material out, but we'll endeavor to get it published for the agenda deadline on next Monday.
Thank you. Council Morris, followed
I
by Council
just
Jurgensen.
wanted to point out that we did give Patrick Wheeler last Monday an extensive update on the HAFT fund
Mhm.
and what we were using the money for and that sort of thing. So it's there in the recording.
Council Jurgensen, followed by Council Getty.
For the big, other big projects like the sewer expansion, flow and infiltration, is there, did the municipality apply for the chip funding, opportunity that was available a number of weeks ago from the federal government?
In the end, we seek direction from council last week as to whether or not we should move forward with that application. And the feedback from council was that perhaps it would be best placed to wait until the provincial allocation comes out. Those projects would be 75% grant funded, 25% municipal funded. That the ability to find municipal funding to come up with the other almost $5 million of the project was just not feasible at this time.
Thank you.
Okay. Council Getty.
Move the recommendation.
Yeah.
Okay, that council received second draft of the 2025 2029 5-year financial plan for information. And then a meeting of the parcel tax review plan will be set for 4 p.m. on Thursday, April 24th, 2025. To hear complaints related to the municipal parcel tax rolls and to authenticate the 2025 parcel tax rolls.
Moved by Council Getty, seconded by Councilor Fast. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That carries.
Do we need to have people designated to sit on that parcel tax?
They're designated through the term.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you to our CFO. No correspondence was dealt with in consent. No reports of committees, new business. 11.1 presentation of the 2025 strategic plan update. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation for anyone that was waiting with bated breath to see it. But I did want to speak a few words on behalf of council about strategic plan.
Anybody can look at it, it's in the agenda.
Yeah, anybody can look at it, it's in the agenda. So just to recap for the community, I think some of the important elements of the strategic plan is that this planning process began when this council was first elected back in 2022, and began with a teasing out of themes that we wanted to focus on and accomplish throughout the term. And those 4 themes were a diverse and resilient community, strong infrastructure and asset management, engaged community and effective government, and responsible ecosystem protection. Where we are at now in the middle of the term, it's been just over 2 years since we were elected, and we made some plans for all of these pieces, but I think it's important to highlight for folks that the discussion of council at this strategic planning meeting has really been between now and the end of this term, how can we bring things to ground? How can we land the projects that we've already started? How can we get detailed? How can we get things completed? So, you know, whether it's pieces like, you know, under the diverse and resilient community theme, like diverse and affordable housing, and establishing a community-owned housing organization, getting it funded, getting it off the ground, so that by the time this council hands off the next one, that initiative is in place and they have something strong and funded and ready. In terms of infrastructure, you know, delivering on these tricky, sometimes beleaguered capital projects like Cove Bay Water, like the community center, which we've got occupancy for now, and we will be moving into in the next 2 weeks, and the community can look forward to an opening night and opening celebrations of that, and finally get in and make some use of it. You know, finishing those projects on top of doing some tangible planning work that gets a handle on what we have and what we own, what's in the ground, and how much it's going to cost to maintain it through a strong asset management planning framework, which is underway and happening. The governance of our utilities and water systems and the consolidation of the consolidation that's happened in terms of community engagement by reducing the water committees and holding more public engagement. Completion of our committee of the whole last week, where the public was able to see our water systems and utilities in detail as a whole and ask questions and have all that come in front of council. We're just getting that engaged community and effective government. We've strengthened our intergovernmental relations. I believe that we are strongly known to Metro Vancouver, at least now, but as well as TransLink, and in terms of representing ourselves to provincial and senior and Indigenous governments, we've been working our best on that. We've been working internally on records management, on organizational efficiency, and that's only expected to grow and become more aligned with best practices as we move through into the future. Certainly, you know, the last theme in terms of responsible ecosystem protection, as we just saw in the budget, we're looking at a comprehensive $100,000 plan for watershed management at Grafton Lake. We're looking at water sustainability, some of the next steps with our water systems. Now that we've gotten them all on conservation-based billing, is going to be looking at how do we manage our water resources on the island as a whole, given the increasing pressures of climate change and our need to adapt to it. There's other pieces on the island, like I can see in our strategic plan, like applying to the Pacific Institute of Climate Solutions to fund additional staff to update our climate action plan, to work more closely with Metro Vancouver and its aspirations for Climate 2050, especially as municipalities under regional government are being asked to do more and are being asked to take more responsibility in terms of climate action. This is all available in the plan. Any of our council members here, even though I'm the one speaking to the strategic plan right now, everybody had a lot to say, robust discussion around the table about what it was that we wanted to do and how we're going to move these things across the finish line. So I would encourage any community members that are interested in talking about our strategic plan, talking about what it is that we want to do, talking about what it is that we'd like to go, where we'd like to go as a community, particularly as we look to ground another big project, our official community plan by the end of this term. Any councillor around this table, myself, as well as staff, for folks that want to come in and talk to us, we are more than happy to talk to you about what we've done this term and what we're looking to do as we close it out, rounding into 2026. So those are the comments from the chair. I'll just look to council if there's any additional pieces that we would like to add before we move on. Councillor Getty.
I think it's a really good looking plan, and I congratulate the staff in terms of the presentation. That we put a lot of hard work into the content, but I think the actual delivery is really nice.
Okay. Moving on to 11.2. Formally adopted the plan.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Update to council on Metro Vancouver business. Thank you to Councillor Wake for delivering the last update of Metro Vancouver. It was a very objective and non-spicy view of what's actually going down at Metro Vancouver these days. Metro Vancouver is currently in a budget process. It has its own capital woes that it is working through with the North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant, as well as looking at how to fund other major capital projects can be done, the pipelines like Iona, the Iona treatment plant, and it's how would I put it? Local government feels fractal, you know, so we deal with projects very similar in nature, but on the order of millions of dollars, and they're dealing with their projects similar in nature, but on the order of billions of dollars. I think it's worth mentioning that there feels like some internal debate coming within the board of Metro Vancouver as to what it is that Metro Vancouver should be doing and what sorts of services that they should be involved in. The board feels fairly divided these days as the new chair, or the recently installed chair, Chair Hurley, is looking to find consensus and figure out a path forward. But at this point, it feels like every department in Metro Vancouver is on the table to decide what are we going to do? Are we going to be in the business of air quality and climate action? Are we going to be in the business of collaborating municipally around the table? Are we going to be in the business of funding ABCD, whatever programs and projects it is? And it seems as if we're going through a line by line accounting and a line by line vote of what should be kept and what should not be kept. I think this is going to have implications either in this term or early the next. In what Metro 2050 looks like, the regional growth strategy. We don't participate in the regional growth strategy, but I think there's disagreements brewing amongst the municipalities around what the implications for the regional growth strategy mean and how it should be interpreted, and whether we actually want to do what we want to, what this board, if this board wants to do what the previous board has set out. On a local level, there was an interesting motion that was passed by the Electoral Area Committee. So the Electoral Area Committee recently had its purview expanded. So it's now called the Electoral Area Committee and Electoral Area and Small Municipalities Forum. And a motion was put forward in that committee by Mayor Barry of Lions Bay and supported by myself and I can't remember his last name. Mayor Jamie of Belcarra. Ross, that's it. Where Metro Vancouver is going to work on a business case. This was approved and adopted by the board. Work on a business case around what it would look like for Metro Vancouver to be a convener and help municipalities, small municipalities, share services. So that includes Bowen Island, Lions Bay, Belcarra, and more. The electoral area and Tsawwassen First Nation are going to be engaged at the staff level to see if there's interest in participating in something like this, and then what it could look like and what the business case for that could be. So it was actually interesting that it was one of the few pieces of action that the board passed without any discussion, debate, and it just seemed like a good idea and advance forward. So I'm looking forward to see what comes out of that, because I think there is room for sharing of resources, sharing of information, and Metro Vancouver as the regional government is perfectly placed as a bit of an umbrella to convene that work. TransLink, I don't think there's been a public meeting of TransLink recently. Because it's all been enclosed, and all I'll say is that discussions with the province and senior levels of government as to the funding future of TransLink are still well on everybody's mind, and there's been no solution put forward yet that can be shared. Councillor Fast.
Just a question back to Metro Vancouver Regional District. Did I see that there's a governance review underway, or is that the line by line of what we should be doing that you were referring to?
Yeah, so there's a governance review that's underway. There's a performance audit of the North Shore wastewater treatment plant, and it also looks like there's going to be some kind of core services review. I believe that and some of that's in flux, like Deloitte's being brought on for part of it, but there's governance questions. And it did come up in the electoral area small municipalities committee that where I think some of us are trying to take that committee is that as small municipalities, when we sit at the big board table, I mean, we just don't have a lot of say. And the say that we do have is when you're talking to Surrey or Vancouver or any of the big municipalities, sometimes it can feel a bit patronizing in that room at times as a small municipality. So I think having some sort of formal governance entity like this small municipalities committee within that structure is going to be positive. At the same time, you'll probably see other changes happening. So the Council of Councils was canceled, likely as an optical cost saving measure at this point, because that's a very big ticket item to run. There's other committees that seem to be on pause. The mayor's committee is not meeting anytime in the near future. And I would be curious to see what comes out of it. So, The difference at Metro Vancouver is that all of those committees are standing committees. So they all serve and are appointed by the chair. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that.
Thank you.
Some more.
From a cost saving for the committee meetings, for things like the mayor's committee or whatever, especially, have they thought about just doing those 100% by Zoom?
Some of them are by Zoom. So when Metro started meeting again at the start of this term, it was really their first time kind of back in person. And there was a big push by the chair at the time to do everything in person. So attending virtually now, you need to send a request in and have it approved by either the chair of the committee that you're attending or chair of Metro Vancouver more broadly. So they do generally try and push the in-person attendance. Okay. Moving on to updates from the Island Trust. I will hand it over to our Islands trustees.
I'll start. Okay, thank you. We're off on the ferry in the morning to Trust Council. That's the 26 trustees meeting together. We'll be meeting in Nanaimo this time as we meet quarterly. One of the things that Islands Trust will be doing is electing a new chair. As Peter Luckham has stepped down and will just be a regular trustee. So there are 3 candidates that we know about so far. And then we're going to be dealing with the budget as well. So right now, I'm the chair of the Financial Planning Committee now. And right now we're up at, Bowen Island is looking at a 12.9% increase versus a local trust areas at 5.2%. It's because we pay for such totally different things. We don't get involved in the planning part, but we do contribute to obviously Trust Council and the Federation-wide Trust Area Services and Islands Trust Conservancy. So that will be debated and we'll see what happens. Anyway, you can get the agenda at the islandstrust.bc.ca website. There's a big calendar there and the agenda's there. And you can watch on live stream and stuff.
Yeah, the election of the new chair is a big ticket item, and the people that are running are co-chairs on the executive committee. So there's going to be, if one of them get elected, then there could very well be another election in the same sitting. So we're going to be, and it's a very, very full agenda, and we wanted to have lots of time set aside to talk about the budget. Like our process today, there's been a lot of discussion with the Financial Planning Committee, and that's going to get brought into the next iteration of it. But this is the last chance we'll have as a council to talk about the budget. And we've been working on trying to whittle it down and go through line by line. And it's an interesting process in terms of everybody dealing with every item on the agenda. So it's the full 5-hour meetings for the Financial Planning Committee are very full. The new CAO is settling in very well, and we're past the 3-month mark. And still the hiring committee has not disbanded. We're figuring out how to formalize all of the assessment of and goal setting and performance measures, and working on policy in terms of we ended up in this process working with a 1965 or 75 policy, and so we've been working on updating that as well. And the overall new policy statement has been going through a series of committee of the whole meetings, the last 2 of which have not met quorum. So we're going to have to rethink how to get all of the details line by line of the policy, the overriding policy. It's a multi-year project that we're trying to get through in this term, and we're having trouble having those discussions, and we don't want to spend a lot of time at the Trust Council meetings because those agendas are really full with the business rather than the policy. So that's a conundrum that we're going to have to try and figure out how to settle as well. And try to figure out the committee of the whole has been a new feature that we just started, I guess 3 to 4 months ago. And they've set it up so that there's 1 meeting a month to try and get through the policy statement and a number of other issues. And we're gonna have to rethink that because it's a waste of time for everybody to set aside 2 or 3 hours in a calendar and not go forward. So a very full agenda and it's gonna be a lovely 3 days in Nanaimo and in a little hotel, and there you go. We'll be back next weekend. So,
Right on. So that's next week. That's all.
this is tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow. Okay.
Is BC Ferries attending?
Yes, they're giving a session.
How are they getting there?
Driving to Victoria.
Scott is gonna beam us up.
I checked in with the mayor about what input he's been providing, so we've got that as well, and I submitted it ahead of time, so share it around again with us to get it.
Right on. Okay, not see any further questions. Anybody here for question period? In the back there?
I was here in case you had questions about community center.
Okay. I will look for a motion to adjourn, please.